All right. Welcome everyone. My name is Lindsay Hack and I'm the co-owner of Hacktive Fit Coaching. And you are coming to us live here for our next podcast with the Healthy ROI, which is where fitness and leadership meet. And I have the fabulous Angela with me. And if you're new here, what this podcast is all about is understanding that fitness and health is all part of a business strategy. Angela has an incredible business, but she also has her health and wellness dialed into that strategy, which is part of why we have success in our business. So I am super excited to welcome Angela. Thank you for being on with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I love it. And when I had this idea of the healthy ROI, there were a few people that kind of popped into my head right out of the gates. And Angela was one of them because we have had a relationship over, the online space for a while. And one of the things we tend to talk about is her half marathon training and doing some of the things that she's been doing. And, anybody who truly understands success with health and fitness also sees how that kind of trickles a domino effect into their business. And so when I reached out to Angela and asked if she would be on this podcast, of course, she was like, yes, I'd love to. So I'm excited for that. So I want to really start off just telling me a little bit about where you kind of everything we do is evolved, right? Everything we do. And that's the beauty of business. That's the beauty of health and wellness. But where did it kind of start with, I need to look at my own health? And this is a very big umbrella, right? When we talk about health, we're talking about holistically all the things. And Angela's going to talk a little bit more about that because that is her expertise. But where did it kind of start where it was like, I actually need to start looking after myself in order to look after my business, my relationships, and everything else going on in my world?
Sure. So I'll give you a little bit of an origin story on how my health journey even started. And so it actually started, I think, about 15 years ago. And I was overweight. I weighed like 280 pounds. And so I went through a wellness journey, a health journey at that point. And so it had already been a habit of mine before I had even started my business. And so I feel like I got really lucky that I had started that part of my journey before I even started my business because I already understood how my weight was affecting me, how it made me feel, how confident it made me feel or didn't make me feel. So I already understood that before I had started my business. And then I kind of maintained my weight. And then that's really when I started my business. And I know that without working out and without running, there was no way that I could have maintained my business at that time. And especially at the very beginning stages, right? You want to give up on your business so bad, at least every other day. You're just like, I'm not sure if I want to do this at all. This is so stupid. What am I doing? And then the next day, you're like, yeah, this is amazing. And then the next day, you're like, please don't make me do this again. And so it's really a roller coaster of emotions, especially in the beginning. And so without running, I don't know what I would have done. Like, I was at that point, I couldn't like live without running at that point. So I was just like, you know what? It's been a bad day with my business. I'm just going to go for a run. It's been a bad day. I'm just going to go for a run. I had a really good day. I'm going to go for a run. So I really like maintained that health part of it to essentially keep me going because I felt like if I couldn't achieve this throughout the day or it was a really hard day, I know that I'm going to be able to do this and then I'll feel accomplished, I'll feel fulfilled, I'll feel like I actually did something for today and I'll use that as the measure of success rather than my business. And so it's just evolved since that point.
I love that so much. And there's so many pieces of that I want to kind of tap into because, the first thing I would say is that, we talk about exercise for our bodies, which is great for our heart and our lungs and all those things. But we often forget to understand the importance of the mental side of it, right? Like you said, I had a bad day, I went for a run. I had a good day, I went for a run. And you're in a situation where, it's a stress relief. I always joke that I hand my husband his running shoes and I'm like, go, get out of here, because he needs that. It's like his therapy, right? He needs that. And so I think that's such a great part to remember when we are looking at our own health and fitness is, what are some of the things that we need to have a little bit of a release, because business is hard, whether it's online by yourself, whether you're in the boardroom with, people, there's a lot going on. And so to have a little bit of a release, I think is amazing. So I love that. The other thing that you said, which I think is really interesting, is you kind of started this weight loss and fitness plan, before you even started your business. But how did you, let's talk about this for a second, because a lot of the times I get people to say to me, whether they are starting in their business, whether they're, doing things longer term, how do you find the time, quote unquote time, when you're so busy? And I was saying to you before we even press start, your calendar behind you is full of stuff. I know you are doing, different things with even your education and all of that stuff. You have a daughter, like there is a lot going on in our world. So how do you find the time to make sure that you are prioritizing yourself and your health?
Sure. So I know no one wants to hear this, but I wake up before my child does. Like there's just there's just not an option for me. As being a single mom and running a business and going to school, it's either I either make excuses or I find the commitment to show up. And because I know that working out and putting myself first feels so good and it helps me deal with, my daughter's only 6, and she does have epilepsy, so we deal with different types of behaviors that she might have. Most kids have grown out at this point, so we deal with meltdowns, and I have to be regulated enough to deal with that and hold space for that. So it is critical for me to make sure that I'm regulated, and so that means working out. And so also a thing that I've noticed, especially over the last 6 months or so, is that people that don't really work out or don't run or don't do those things, they see it, they don't understand that it's a commitment. So I put it in there. So even in my planner, that's not my only calendar. I have another planner and it's in there, workout journal, do these things. And I have it in there just like I would if I need to show up on social media, show up on this podcast. It's written in there just like I would anything else. So I think it's about really creating that commitment and finding what works for you, because I don't recommend waking up at 4 or 5 o'clock to everybody. That's not for everybody. I understand that, but it's what works for me. And I had to figure that out.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much, because one of the things that, I really speak about in my business is, we have this cookie cutter idea. We have all these, plans out there, New Year's resolutions at the time of recording right now are all over the place. And so people think, oh, I have to get that and I have to fit it into my life. And it's actually not true. It's actually the opposite, as you said, which I think is so important that people sometimes forget, is that you have to figure out what works for you. And so here you and I are talking about your running, you getting up early, doing those things. Somebody might be listening, being like, oh my God, I don't like to run. I hate mornings. And all of those things are true. I mean, don't get me wrong. All of those things are true. So finding what works for you. And I say this a lot to my clients, like, if you don't love to run, you're not running. If you don't love mushrooms, we're not asking you to eat mushrooms. Like you have to find what works best for you in order to have success. And, when it comes to time, and I always say quote unquote time, because it's really not the time, it's the priority, right? So for you, the priority for you to regulate yourself, to look after your daughter, to help and be supportive for her through all of the things that she goes through, you take priority to look after you. And I think that's a really important piece, because we all have the same 24 hours in a day, right? We all have the same things. And yes, some people have more, stuff going on, but we all find the priority if it is important to us. And I think that's really, really something that we tend to forget when people are like, oh my gosh, I have no time, or I'm so busy, I can't fit this in, and you wake up early because you need to take that time for yourself before your daughter gets up. Some people do it in the evening. Some people do it on the weekends. Some people are just, going for a walk because they need a little bit of sun on their face. And I think all of those are perfect, right? There's not a right or a wrong way. It's just what you can do and what you commit to doing to yourself. And I think that's so, so important. Now, I'm going to pull in a little bit of your own expertise because your business, isn't necessarily health and wellness like mine, but you speak a lot about healthy habits and focusing on what works, for each individual. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do first of all, and why you find, connecting with your health and your wellness and your movement is so important, and even what you do with your clients?
Sure. So I help women heal childhood wounds and transform their stories. So a lot of that looks like digging at trauma and unhealthy childhood conditioning. And I have learned over the years with my own healing and helping my clients is that if we're not moving our bodies, then we're not moving any of that energy that we need to, number one, release, but is old and stuck in there, and that might be holding on to emotions that we don't really need to be holding on to at all. And so it really helps to look at us from a whole perspective rather than just a mind, right? When we think about going to therapy, we're thinking about talking, and all of that is essentially coming from the mind. But I believe that there's four aspects of us. It's mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And so I feel like when we look at us from a whole aspect in that sense, it's important for us to put in activities or things that really help us take care of ourselves as a whole. And that does mean moving our body. And I feel like, especially in the health industry and our conditioning, is that working out is meant to be punishment. But the reality is that it's not punishment. It's there to help us feel good, right? Like that's where the happy hormones come from, and all of the things and all of that energy comes from. Why would that be considered punishment to our bodies and to ourselves? And so I feel like when we really look at our unhealthy conditioning from our past, especially if you've ever struggled with your weight or what you've been told, I had that experience as a child, and so I had to really re look at how I saw working out and realize I'm not doing this to punish my body. I'm doing this to feel good. So when I'm talking to my clients and I'm telling them, move your body, just go out for a walk. It might help you feel better. We don't even have to talk about trauma. Just notice how different your body feels, how much more clearer you're thinking. And so that is so important because we can't just look at somebody from an emotional standpoint or from a mental standpoint. We have to look at them from a whole standpoint. And so that does mean these other aspects, but it means we have to think about this physical aspect because it plays a huge role in how you feel. And the more that you're feeling, and I feel like everybody knows this at this point, is the more you feel good, the more you're attracting into your life that you want. And so that's really essentially what we're after.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, obviously, I love what you do because it does really help support, movement and fitness in general. But you and I have had multiple conversations about weight and trauma and how that kind of plays such a big role, with people that sometimes I see that, yeah, I think that they need to do a little bit more work from a trauma perspective before they necessarily dive into some of their nutrition or some of their fitness. But I love the fact that you say that the movement of our body, it can be simple as going and having a dance party in the kitchen, and anybody who has ever done some of those things, and that's why I always come back to, like, you do what you like. So, somebody who's like, oh my God, I hate it running, I hate every second of it, there's not a moment of love in that. Okay, that's great, then you don't do that. But if you throw on some music, and I have two teenage daughters and we're dancing like crazy in the middle of the kitchen, you feel better no matter what. And it's interesting, in our house, if we have a lot of tension, I mean, teenage daughters, that does happen sometimes. One of the things that I do to try to break that and to kind of, do a pattern interrupt and move to kind of a different feeling is throw on some music and start dancing. And so we have this idea that we do know that movement does help that, right? There's not a single person out there who can put on some music and just still feel really grumpy and still feel really upset. But we sometimes sometimes forget how to bring that together, right? We sometimes don't see how it all connects. And I think, that's really what this podcast is all about, is understanding that we can connect our movement, we can connect our healthy eating, we can connect our thoughts, positive thoughts, and we can really help support ourselves, not only with our relationships around us, but with our business and with ourselves. And I think that's such an important thing that, sometimes we just feel too busy, right? I mean, I know you are extremely busy, like you say, with your work, with your school, with your kids, like with your kids. So it's really challenging to sometimes find that space for us to release, but we also know there's nothing better than finishing, right? And I think that's a big thing, right? I say to my clients all the time, I understand that kind of, oh, I have to wake up early, or oh, I have my workout, but that moment that it's like, okay, you're done, and that feel good feeling is just, untapped. Like, we can't get away from that. All right, well, let me ask you this. So, people who are listening or people who are watching, they might be looking at you right now, if they can see you, and be like, whoa, 200 and plus pounds, you have come a long way. Again, I don't always say, like, let's focus on the physical, but if somebody's looking at you and they're saying, like, what, how is this even possible? And you had to say to them, what was the best way to start, to just get moving, to do something? What would you have told yourself 15 years ago? And what would you tell that person who's sitting here right now saying, like, I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to begin. And it just feels so hard.
For sure. So I would tell them to do something that they can do in that moment. And these are things that you've already mentioned. Like, if there's no time to go for a 20-minute walk, then what about a 5-minute dance party? What about doing a 5-minute stretch on YouTube? What about, you can do jumping jacks. You can do, it doesn't even have to be that serious. You can find something on Pinterest and they give you like a 5-minute warm up to your morning. That's what I would say, because I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in the mentality of go big or go home. So that means that we have to, we're going to go outside and we're going to go try to run 5 miles, even though I've never run before in my life. And now I'm going to be pissed off at myself because I couldn't even make it halfway down the block. And it's like, okay, we have to really put these things into perspective. If you haven't moved your body for a really long time, I would not tell someone go run. Not at all. I would be like, why don't you just take a walk around the block and then just start there? And then tomorrow, why don't you walk around the block and then half of the other block and then turn around? And so it's just about these small habits over time that compound over time. What will happen is eventually, if you start off small, you're able to actually get that done. Even if you walked for only 2 minutes and then that was it, and then you came home and then that's what you were doing. We don't have to bite into this huge pie that we're not ready to actually take on. And so I feel like it's really important for us to remember, okay, what am I really capable of? So just like people that fall off the bandwagon with going to the gym and they haven't been to the gym in a few months, I wouldn't be like, okay, it's time for you to go 7 days a week. I would be like, what actually sounds good? What do you feel like is a stretch, but something that you know that you're capable of? Maybe it really is only once a week right now, and that's fine. Do once a week for maybe a month. And then let's talk about doing twice a month, and then, or twice a week, and then we just increase from there. It's something that we really need to move away from, is thinking, okay, and especially right now with the New Year's resolutions and all of the things, it's like, okay, I'm committed to becoming this new me version and all of these things. So I'm going to go 7 days a week. If you haven't been to the gym at all for even just a year, you're not making it 7 days a week. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer or whatever. It's just not going to be something you're going to commit to at this point in time. And that's okay. It's about really being able to work within our weaknesses. And so, and I feel like this is super important because I do help women develop self discipline. And I feel like there's become this notion, I guess, that you have to push against your weaknesses. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. Okay. I know for me, I'm a lazy runner. Okay. So I have to run outside my door. I'm not going to get in the car, and go to a trail and then run and then get back in my car and then drive back. I will have, as soon as someone tells me that, there's a million excuses. My time, my daughter, what's the weather going to be like? Is there going to be anybody else? Where am I going to put my keys? Like all of these questions start to come up. And I'm like, no, this is how we eliminate that. Obviously, that's not what I'm going to do. So I'm going straight from my door, because as soon as I go from my door, there's no excuses. I'm already started, I'm already there. So I really encourage people to look at their weaknesses and their excuses as to what can you do that you know that you're willing to do without all the excuses and without needing to fight yourself on those excuses. You've got to start small. Taking on too much is never going to work, and it doesn't work for anybody.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. There's so many things that you just said there that I constantly am talking to my clients and on our podcast and doing these things because it doesn't matter what we think, right? I always say what we think we should be doing, quote unquote, should be doing, whether that's the health and nutrition industry telling us that, whether that's our sister-in-law saying, hey, you should take these pills, right? It doesn't matter. What matters is what you can do. And small manageable habits. You talked about the compound interest effect. It's probably one of my best. I say this all the time when I talk to people. It's like, oftentimes you get pushback where people are saying, well, it just doesn't seem like enough. You're telling me to go for a walk for 5 minutes 3 days a week. It just doesn't seem like enough, but it's more than what you probably were doing before. So if you can build that up slow, steady, consistent, right? Like you said, it's first, it's 5 minutes, then it's 12 minutes, and then whatever. For me, my big thing is that, I'll hum and haw over going, to the gym or doing my workout. And my first step is always just put my gear on, put my shoes on, put my shirt on, put my pants on, because now I'm in my workout clothes and I'm like less likely to say, oh, I don't want to. Now, does it always work? No. And I think what you said, beautifully is the idea is that you do what works for you and you take out any, I call them speed bumps, right? If you imagine you're going down a road and you're going super fast and all of a sudden 5 speed bumps come out, you got to slow down. Right now, imagine you take some of those speed bumps away and you can speed back up again, right? So we use the idea of what you just said, getting in the car and finding a trail, and now what's the weather like, and you have all these things in your head. But for you remove the speed bumps by running out your door. Right. For somebody, it might be, I need a friend who meets me at the gym, or somebody else, it may be, I need to make sure that I get up early because I know all my excuses are going to come out before the end of the day. Right. So everybody is different and we have to find what works best for us. And that is the ultimate. If I can get anybody to take anything away from these conversations with what you're saying, with everything that we're talking about, is it has to work for you. And that is how we become successful, because all of these things that you hear, whether it's New Year's resolutions or diet pills or workouts or new fancy pieces of equipment, they all do work. There's nothing out there that is like, oh, that doesn't really work. They do, but we get bombarded and overwhelmed by all the things, and then we're like deer in the headlights and we don't do anything. Right? So finding that thing that works for you is really the best thing. Start small, build up from there. Healthy habits is basically how I create all my clients' work, because it's like you start here, you move slowly, you do something. Maybe it's drinking some more water, maybe it's adding your protein, now it's going for a walk, now it's going to the gym. But as you said, if it hasn't been part of your routine the year before, when we do New Year's resolutions or we get to a place where like, now I'm going to the gym 7 days a week, the reason that you don't do that is because it's really, really hard. I would even go to say almost impossible to go from 0 to 100, right? So this idea of go big or go home, right? We live in that world and it's not helpful. It's not true. Like it really doesn't make it easier for us. It actually makes it harder. And then we go through that fail. I'm a loser. Like these things that go into our head that we're like, oh my gosh, why can't I stick to anything? Why can't I, stick to my diet? It's the same with restriction, right? And I think you find what works for you. And that's the most important thing. I always say I am the laziest. You said lazy runner. I am the laziest in the kitchen. So I have a Bachelor of Nutritional Sciences. I know all the things about nutrition, but I am never going to use my Fitness Pal. I'm never measuring my food because it's just not what I am going to do long term. So I find a different way. And I know it's successful because I've done it personally multiple times. I've worked with clients multiple times. So the idea of what you should do or have to do is actually not true. You can do what works best for you. So I love that. I love that. All right. So I'm gonna finish up here with just, if you could tell everybody who's listening or watching the one thing, the non-negotiable for you when it comes to your health and wellness? And that could be maybe waking up early before your daughter, which is what you said. Or is there something that you could say that, again, everybody listening or everybody watching, this is for Angela, not for everybody else. But what we're trying to do with this podcast is inspire others to understand that it's possible, right? That it's absolutely possible to look after your health and your wellness. And not only is it possible, it actually does wonders for your business. It's a great business strategy for your relationships and for yourself ultimately. So if there was something that you could say is my non-negotiable, what is it that you would share with everybody?
So my non-negotiable that I do for myself in regards to health and wellness is actually journaling. So if I don't always go and work out, which is unusual for me at this point, but if I don't make it to the workout, or even if I'm having like a rough period or something like that, the journaling has to be done. And that is something that I have been doing now for years. I think it's been about 12 years, and it has just made such a huge difference in my life. And I actually feel like it releases all the weird and crazy thoughts that I'm thinking so that I can actually make it to the workout. And so I feel like journaling is something that has become the most important thing for me as far as my health and wellness, because it just helps all the way around.
I love that. I love that. And again, anyone listening who is like, I don't like journaling, you don't have to. Remember this. It's not you that you have to do. It's Angela specifically. But finding that thing that's a non-negotiable, finding that thing that's in your place. I have a client that I've been working with for years, and I am classified as one of her non-negotiables because without me, she wouldn't get her workout in. And so it can be different for everyone. And I hope that you take that away from this, is that no matter who I'm talking to or what we're talking about, it doesn't have to be cookie cutter for you. It can be whatever works best for you. Well, Angela, it's been so great speaking to you. So tell me, if somebody wants to know more about you, more about your story, for those of you guys who don't, she has an amazing, incredible story. So I highly recommend getting to connected with her. But where would they find you? Where would they find your information? And if they have any questions, how would they reach out?
Sure. So you can find me anywhere pretty much. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok now. You can find me at Angela, or Transform with Angela. That's what my handle is, at Transform with Angela.
Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Well, guys, again, another episode done and finished. If you guys have any questions, or if there's any questions that you specifically want me to be asking some of these incredible leaders and CEOs and amazing business owners, please let me know, because, we're here for conversation. We're here for information. We're not here to tell you. Nobody likes to be told what to do, but we want to give you ideas and understandings that it can be possible, whether you feel you're too busy, whether you feel you're not fit enough, whether you feel you have limitations or injuries or etc. We're here to support you and be a part of that and say that you can do it. It just may look different for everybody. And that's the beauty of what we're doing. So until next week, have yourself a fantastic day. And again, Angela, thank you so much for joining us. We will speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you for
Bye.
having me. Bye.